Town of Littleton Board of Health meeting for today, January 8th, 2025. Happy New Year. This is our first meeting of the year. Present this evening are board members Matt Wason, Dan Kane, Kevin Davis, and Kevin Baker. I believe you're here, Kevin Baker. Oh, there we go. As well as our director, Francis Daigle, and our supporting staff. First item on our agenda is 7 p.m. public hearing for 8 Dahlia Drive, brought to us by Kirk with Civil Solutions for a variance request.
Good evening. I'm Kirk Fitzpatrick with Civil Solutions, and I'm here on behalf of MOZ Property Solutions for 8 Dahlia Drive. And I'd be happy to share my screen. So basically what we have proposed before you tonight is an upgrade for the existing 4-bedroom dwelling. Trying to zoom in here a little bit. Oops, sorry. So currently, the house is on this lot on this side, which is the 10,000 square foot, lots 624 to 628. And the leaching area, septic tank and pump chamber are on the same side as the house, and the leaching area is on the opposite side of the street on lots 394 to 398. I'm actually pretty familiar with this property. The previous design was done by Diversified Civil Engineering, where I used to work in 1998, and I was involved in the design and oversaw some of the construction of the previous system. So right now it's got a 1,000-gallon septic tank, which flows to a 1,250-gallon pump chamber and pump the liquid through a force main, which crosses under Dahlia Drive to a leaching field on the opposite side of the road, a stone and pipe leach field. So what we're proposing to do is to replace the existing septic tank with a new 1,500-gallon 2-compartment tank. It's going to be monolithic and H20 loading. We're proposing to reuse the 1,250-gallon pump chamber that was installed in 1999. It is H20 loading, so it's heavy duty, and we're going to reuse the force main that leads to the other side of the street. We went out and conducted additional soils testing. The soils testing that was done before is SP 998-1, and then there was another one done on the other side of the street, SP 998-2. Back in 1999, you only had to have one deep observation hole in the area where you're going to site a system. So we went out and conducted additional test holes to meet the current requirement of a minimum of 2. So we did test hole 2 and test hole 3. Test hole 2 showed some fill in place from when the last system was constructed. Zoom over here. So you can see that about 6 inches of fill, an old layer of subsoil, and then it went to a sandy loam, which is what we saw last time. So it now has a season high water table of 72 inches. And then we tried another test hole off to the side here, which is test hole 4. And it was all just, test hole 3, and that was all buried material. So what we're proposing to do is to put a new leaching area composed of the Presby and Viroseptic in basically the same footprint as the existing stone and pipe bed. The house has not been occupied for a little bit, so the system should be dried out by now. So they'll basically excavate out where the Presby is going to go and 2 feet around it, back down to the original parent material, so down to about 72 inches, and then fill it with Title V sand, and then build the Presby on top of the sand. So the new system actually, with that elevation of a water table, stays just in the ground, and we're taking advantage of the fill that was put in place when the previous system was constructed. So with that being said, we're requesting approval for the use of the Presby with a reduction of the groundwater offset from 5 feet to 3 feet. And we're asking for approval under 310 CMR 15.4051J to allow less than 12-inch separation between the inlets and outlets of the tank and seasonal high groundwater. And the septic tanks are required to be ordered as a monolithic tank and ordered with boots, so it'll be sealed. And I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Kirk, for that. Francis, could you provide your input, please?
I just had one question. So the second request, Is that just for the flow so it won't direct right out, or
The separation.
the end? Yeah.
So basically what Title V says is you have to have a minimum of a 12-inch separation between the seasonal high water table and the inverts of the tank. Based on the modeling we had in this test hole over here, if you hold that elevation, the inlet invert coming into the pump chamber has about a 6-inch offset from the seasonal high water table. So we're still not within the water table, but it doesn't meet the minimum 12-inch code that the code specifies. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right, we have notes from Jim Greffey, our health agent, who's not present tonight. I will read them for everyone. The sewage disposal system for this property has failed. A Title V inspection needs to be replaced. This office witnessed soil testing at the site to confirm the conditions noted in previous testing and provided testing in accordance with Title V. The applicant is looking to install the new leaching system in the location of the previous leach field. The old soil will be removed down to the original soil, and the area will be filled with Title V sand. Applicant would like to maintain the original grading and is proposing the use of Presby system. DEP approval of the Presby system allows for an offset reduction of up to 2 feet between the estimated high groundwater and the leaching area. The proposed system would allow the existing grading to remain, which should alleviate concerns about surface runoff from the installation. The Presby system provides some treatment of the wastewater, minimizing the requested reduction to the groundwater offset. The area is served by town water. There are no wetlands within 100 feet of the system, and Jim believes the proposed design with the requested offset reduction will provide a reasonable solution for the existing failed system. I think the only note there, and that's what Francis was just asking about, is that Jim didn't mention the reduction for your inlet.
Yeah, I talked to Jim on Monday about it, and he had me add that. I didn't have that on there initially, because I think these tanks were closer to the ground surface when this was originally built, and then they added this patio area and built up the backyard a little bit. But Jim asked me to add that request, so I did. But I'm not concerned about the offset to the water table with the inverts, but I think to cover ourselves, we should have it on there. And the tank will be ordered as a monolithic H20 tank with rubber boots. And basically those rubber boots have a clamp on them, so the pipe coming in and out gets sealed. The boot gets sealed to the pipe, and then they'll also use a butyl seal around the risers to make sure that everything's watertight.
All right, and for the board, the letter in the packet, just because we're on the topic, did not include that second variance request for the less than 12-inch separation. So that's why an additional letter was sent out yesterday afternoon that included that. So we have that in our possession, and so we can approve based upon that letter if need be. Now we will go to questions around the board. Kevin Davis, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Was the drawing submitted as well? Because the drawing being presented has the two approvals, whereas the drawing in the packet only has a single. Was the drawing resubmitted as well?
Yes, it was. It was submitted with the revised letter.
Okay, great. My next question is there any concern from the engineer about placing the tanks underneath the patio for serviceability or anything else like that?
No, so they'll have risers brought to grade over the inlet and the outlet of the tank, and that the riser over the pump chamber is already brought to grade. And they're both going to be H20, so if they did push snow over the top of them and plow over them, they can support a vehicular traffic. But the patio area is pavers, and it's going to be put back the way it was, so that they'll still have adequate access to the tanks.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Kevin Baker.
Hi, thanks. Kirk, it's amazing you worked on this back in when was it? 98?
At 98 and 99. I'm dating myself here.
Yeah, it must make you feel very distinguished. That's good. I was curious how they ever got approval to put a septic system on a separate lot, let alone cross a municipal road with a pipe.
Yeah, at the time, my recollection is Sherry Gould was involved. And they determined that they had legal rights because they owned both sides of the road to the center line of the road so they could cross it. And then they added it to the deed that basically restricts the property. It restricts lots 394 and 398 to be used for the septic system for this house. And to do anything else with that property, you would have to remove the system and have it relocated on the side of, that has the house on it.
Yeah, so
So
I'm
there
curious,
is
have they
language in the
considered,
deed. that
have they
there's a lot for
considered
it.
moving the system over to the where the house is?
The groundwater there was significantly higher and the perk rate was worse. I think this is definitely the most cost-effective solution. The fill's already in place for this new leaching area. So they're basically just replacing the leaching area and the breakout fills is adequate. If they put it on the other side, they'd be building up the yard probably 3 or 4 feet, and it would probably double the cost of it. So I think this is the most cost-effective solution, and the soils were better on the other side of the street.
I appreciate the cost aspect of it, but we're here looking at public health and regulations. And I'm curious also why you're not asking for the 2-foot. Was the perk too fast, or are you within the wetland boundary?
So the record percolation rate, that perk A, is actually 2 minutes an inch, but it's a class 2 soil. So it's actually designed to equivalent of a 10 minutes per inch perk rate. So it's technically a 2-minute soil, so it would have to have a 5-foot offset.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Dan, Kane, any questions?
Nope. Actually, I think Mr. Baker covered my questions of, yep, 2 separate lots and how they, obviously it's been there and has been in place and approved years ago. But yeah, how do we make sure those 2 lots are basically permanently entwined because since we have system on one side and housing on the other, but it sounds like that's covered with restrictions on the open lot. If it ever tried to do anything else with it. So I don't think I have any technical questions around the design. So interesting solution, and I'm glad it's been able to hold up to 30 years later for a replacement system.
All right, Kirk, just, I think you said it, but the separation between inlets and outlets and the seasonal high groundwater, did you say it was 6 inches?
Yes. So
Okay.
the lowest invert is about 6 inches above the water table. The
Okay.
seasonal high water table.
All right, that was my only question. I thought that's what you said. Are there any questions from the audience? Any abutters with a question? Raise your hand if you are. Does not appear to be any additional questions. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve a 2-foot reduction from 5 feet to 3 feet off the groundwater with use of the Presby system, as well as a reduction from 12 inches to 6-inch separation between the seasonal high water table and the inlet and outlet of the tanks as requested for 8 Dahlia Drive.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker.
Yes.
Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis, yes.
Dan Kane.
Dan Kane votes yes.
And Matt Wason votes yes. Your variances are approved.
Great.
Good luck with the project,
I
Kirk.
appreciate it very much. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
I would love legal advice for the double side of the fee because I seem to recall the Supreme Court of Massachusetts changing their mind. But whatevs.
Grandparented in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next on our agenda, 7:05, public hearing for 9 Aspen Road, presented by Dana McKeel.
My name's Joe Kidd. I'm the homeowner at 9 Aspen Road. I'll be presenting our material today.
Very well. Thank you.
I believe Dana McKeel from Integrity Building and Design will be on the Zoom if there are any questions that are best targeted towards him. So my topic for tonight is to talk about the deed restriction viability on as it relates to our design plans to expand our master bedroom suite, and talk about how that will meet the expanding needs that people tend to have for a house now in the post-COVID world, while still ensuring that the future homeowners for the house will be won't be led to violate the 2-bedroom septic limit. I can share my screen with a application. Okay, so starting out with a view of the existing second floor of the house, coming in off of the main hallway into the master bedroom. And as I'm sure you've seen of many people in Zoom calls, I'm currently sitting in a faux office area here in the corner of the bedroom with several shelving units all surrounding it to sort of give a little bit of visual separation from the space. And in this space, there is an existing door that leads out to a unfinished attic area above the garage. In the proposed new design, we move down here. This existing doorway will lead to a closet storage area, which will then lead into this other this newly built office space here, which is a bit of a compromise design in order to make sure that this space has a window over here for some access to natural light and for fresh air. So the motivation for making this design change to the house is pretty clear. Having two adults in a post-pandemic world who are both working from home and needing to be on conference calls, sometimes across different time zones, there's a need for additional space. And then the question is, why do it this way? And by making the office space here part of this larger master suite, rather than having it be a separate room off onto itself, it does sort of help support the intent behind the 2-bedroom deed restriction on the house. That for any future owners who might have a different intent, there would really be no expectation of privacy for somebody in this room having no access to the rest of the house other than passing through the current bedroom space. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Francis, we'll start with your input, please.
So if we're looking at intent of the space and increased flow potential, I mean, it's up to the board, but I'd be more worried about the office than the family room addition. Although I might be concerned with the additional bathroom and that it is shielded off for the family room with a slider that it could have potential other accessory use, but just initial thoughts.
Dan, go ahead.
Sorry, just kind of back up a little bit here. So Mr. Kidd talked about the space over the garage. There was no discussion from the petitioner regarding the addition on the rear of the house with bathroom, laundry room, and family room. Is that part of your proposal and you just didn't cover it, or is that wishful thinking on a plan that's not going to actually be implemented?
Yep, but no, my apologies. This addition out into the back of the house is still as part of the plan. my belief coming into this call was that this area would be generally less controversial, as it is very much a living room type feel, and that this may not even have been brought to a board meeting if we were just looking to build the addition off of the back. But we are requesting this. That this is part of our plan. This is part of our request.
I think it was brought to the board because although there is going to be an increase in room count, it does not hit the max. But given that they did have a previous restriction on the deed for the 2-bedroom, it should be presented to the board because there will be an increase in use and possible potential of flow.
Kevin, hold a second. I'm going to read Jim's comments. 9 Aspen, the applicant would like to add a living room onto their home. The sewage disposal system for the property was installed in 2019 and was sized to handle the existing 2-bedroom house. As a condition of the sewage disposal system permit, a deed restriction was recorded on the property limiting the house to the 2 existing bedrooms. The current house has 5 rooms, 2 of which are bedrooms, and they would like to add additional living space to the first floor. The board has discretion to allow the construction to forward under the existing restriction. So there is a gap there. If Jim mentions adding additional living space to the first floor, but not additional space in the upstairs. Did he see these plans as presented?
Yes, he has. There was some discussion between the contractor and Jim back in December, where out of some concerns for the second floor area, the contractor was considering separating that out and not implementing the second floor work above the office. It is possible that Jim wrote up his comments in preparation for last month's meeting under those assumptions. But I did speak with Jim just yesterday over lunchtime to discuss the implications of the office space above the garage.
Okay. And since you have it pulled up, would you mind shifting back to the main floor of the existing building, please?
Main floor of existing.
Right there. So current room counts would be kitchen, dining, and living. That's 3 rooms on the first floor. Now, if you go to the second floor, please. And the second floor has 2 bedrooms and an office. So that's 3 more. Without Jim here, I'm not sure where he got his 5 existing, but that looks like 6 in the property card, and the property does have 6.
So this room labeled as office here is 54 square feet. And to be counted as a room in Title IX, I believe it needs to be 70 square feet or larger. So this office, by Jim's count, would not be fitting into that number. That's where he comes up with his 5 in the current plan.
Well, I assume that's what's being counted on for the property card.
I can confirm that Jim typically does not count rooms that are lower than the 70 square feet as rooms. Okay. Yeah.
And then the proposal would add, if you keep scrolling down, please.
Proposal would add 2 additional rooms. This family room, really be setting up as an exercise room in the lower level, and this office room being added into the master suite.
Okay. So one additional room on the main floor, 1 additional room on the second floor.
Correct.
Okay. Questions from the board? Kevin Baker.
Mr. Kidd, have you consulted with a septic engineer, or do you have an as-built plan of your septic system?
So shortly after moving into the house, I did have a discussion with the engineer who'd worked on the house. Worked on the 2019 plan. I don't have an as-built view of the septic field. This is our certified plot plan. You can see the access to the distribution box comes out this way, and then my drain lines are laid out along here. So one of the first questions coming into the house was, is there viability to expand the size of the septic? And the placement of the septic says there just is no additional space to be able to expand it across to the edge of the property this way. The only additional space that is on the plot of land is up here, and you can tell from the grading lines here that this is very steeply uphill from the rest of the house. There would need to be a substantial amount of pumping and retaining walls leading up, 8 feet to be able to create a leach field off in this back portion of the lot.
Francis, have you seen the as-built in the file? Or is it attached to OpenGov?
I have not seen it in the file.
I'm only asking, Mr. Kidd, because you're only allowed to have 2 bedrooms in this house, and it's limited to the 5 rooms that you currently have. And this board has many times stuck to our to the rules and regulations when it comes to adding additional space in a pre-existing septic system.
Yes, and I certainly don't want to do anything that would add additional bedrooms. Our deed restriction, I did often and look it up. So certainly, we would have no intention of doing anything to go beyond this restriction of having 2 bedrooms. And
yeah, it's not you we're worried about. It's the next person.
Certainly. And I think that it would have been, I think, a very natural way to add an additional office space is to just, have a hallway here and then, have a second floor off of the addition. And I think that would look very much like a bedroom. It would have very much of a look and a feel of a bedroom. And, if I were in your shoes, I would not want to approve that. The intent of trying to put this inside the master suite and make sure that there is no presumption of privacy that one could expect from this room as a bedroom is part of the goal. If there are other design changes to this room where there would be other protrusions or some columns or half-height walls added to it in order to get your support to make sure that it does not look and feel, it doesn't quack like a duck, and it would not have the presumption of being a bedroom to a future user. Those are conversations we'd be very open to have.
I don't have it online, Kevin.
Yeah, no, I think it's not necessarily the bedroom count that we're worried about. It's more the overall room count, because that's what bases the requirement of the septic system is the overall room count. So I think it's total number of rooms divided by 2 and rounded down is what would be required of your sewage disposal system. So that's why I was curious to look at the as-built to see if there's room to put another leach line in there, because that would be probably the most likely solution for you.
Yep.
But thanks for answering those questions. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Questions, Kevin Davis?
Is the current unfinished space over top of the garage heated or not?
It is not.
Okay. And the new office space, we're assuming, would be heated.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I count 6, and the most you can have is 5. So I'm having issues.
So I would suggest that the way that Title V insists is that it's when the total number of rooms in the dwelling exceeds 8 the dividing by two and then rounding down starts to come into effect. And, that starts to become understandable from looking at, once you put in the living room, dining room, and kitchen, you have already kind of exceeded the number of allowed excess rooms for a two-bedroom house.
And that's why you have the deed restriction.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
exactly why you have the deed restriction.
Well, I believe the deed restriction comes from the presumption to have at least 3 bedrooms, and the intent of this house. This house is not built to be a large suburban McMansion. It is a small craftsman style home that we need to adjust now to meet new usage needs. So am I hearing that the concern is primarily room count and not finished space?
Yes, I'm guessing that the board is asking specifically about room count because that is what we are accustomed to do. But that is finished space. Finished space equals rooms that we then count. So, questions, Dan Kane?
Thank you very much. I'm in agreement with the discussion around room counts, and we recognize that, it's not a cookie cutter solution. It's really designed for, you get a 20-room house, and how do you scale a system for that size of a house if you've got 3 bedrooms in it? So I hear Mr. Kidd, and that is actually that was the intent for that piece. I do have some questions. And again, it is not about your intent. It really is looking at the future, which is why we put deed restrictions in, because we obviously believe what you're presenting us. I guess I'm not as concerned about the space over the garage as much as, I'll be honest, I'm looking at that family room. Lovely looking space, but you know what it looks like to me, or it certainly could easily become? That's an au pair, in-law, accessory dwelling kind of model, that you've got a 20 by 12 room, first floor, full bathroom. That easily looks like an additional master bedroom if the need arose. While I know that is not your intent, I'm not suggesting that it is, but just if someone threw this plan down in front of me and said, show me 3 bedrooms on here, I close that door going into the dining room, it's a 3-bedroom, 2-master suite, or an en pair suite house. So I guess for me is that I hear you saying that, yep, bedroom rules, you go into another bedroom, it doesn't count. That's what we're looking at room count. I'll be honest, I'm looking at that family room as an easily close a door, and you've got a studio apartment, which obviously would put this at a 3-bedroom house. I think the combination of the room count and that space easily meeting all criteria for a bedroom has me a little bit concerned. I'm not quite that. This is the balance of living in the lake, is that you have small lots, limited sizes for systems, and just like everybody through COVID, and just like everybody in the lake, we need more space. We need more space, and you're working on a tiny system with a tiny lot with a tiny system, and you're trying to make the most house you can with what you got. And it looks like a great plan. I'm concerned about you might be pushing your resources of a septic system a little bit too far with the plan you proposed. I've got some hesitation because of that.
I understand. The slider being left in place was a easy default answer for cost minimization. If instead this wall were removed and the entire area were opened up, does that change your concern level?
I can't speak for the other board members. I don't think so.
Okay.
That's 3 hours at Home Depot, and it's a door again. So leaving a door off, I don't think for me anyway would necessarily change my concern around that space. But
Thank you for your input, Dan. I was going to echo the same kind of thing. It's a lot of rooms, and while I appreciate that the room count is kind of geared towards houses with 3-bedroom systems and up, we don't see a lot of 2-bedroom system plans come through here as much. This is an increase in room count of 2 based on the property card. I think it's a 6-room house. It looks like it would be going to 8, but it's also going from 2 bathrooms to 3 bathrooms. And so those are all things that, well, they might not be written down exactly in the letter of saying, oh, well, the bathroom count doesn't really matter. It's a septic system and we're adding bathrooms. And to Dan's point, that looks like you've effectively added a room that meets the Title V definition for a bedroom and an additional bathroom adjacent to it. What I do have some questions, and we don't have the answers here because there would be questions to Jim about potentially, or if another board member can speak to, what is our kind of typical response for 2-bedroom houses? As I said, I can't recall the last time we had a 2-bedroom house come up for rooms, but to see if Littleton has some sort of track record with these and what they tend to use, because I agree, right? If you do a room count, you can't have more than a kitchen and a dining room and you're over. So that's not necessarily the right thing to apply here. So perhaps it would make sense to try to get some more input from Jim. And the other thing is, you mentioned a deed restriction. What is the deed restriction for, or why was that deed restriction applied? Do you know?
There is a presumption that homes have at least 3 bedrooms and could be 4 bedrooms or more based on room count. This house has only 2 bedrooms. It is limited to being 2 bedrooms by the septic. So this makes sure that there is no presumption of it being a 3-bedroom house as written in Title V.
Okay, so it's simply because it's a 2-bedroom house, there's a deed restriction that says it's a 2-bedroom house.
Yeah, that I believe was not in place when the system was originally done, but expectations changed between then and when the system needed to be rebuilt in 2019.
Yep. Mr. Baker.
Mr. Kidd, I suggest you try and find a copy of your as-built plan or speak to the engineer that put it together. Somehow find that information, maybe speaking with Mr. Griffey or going down to the Neshoba Board of Health and Air to look in their library there of all the plans they have, because I bet your system can handle 330 gallons per day, which is a 3-bedroom. So you need to figure out how many gallons per day the system's rated for. They called it a 2-bedroom system because your property card, when they tore the old house down that was there, said that there was a 2-bedroom there. That was like a summer home for somebody. So I think you just need to do a little bit more research on what your septic is. And you might find that, maybe you can't do the whole addition, but maybe you can do, some of it.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to continue.
Second.
You're muted.
You're muted, Matt.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker.
Kevin Baker says yes.
Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis says yes.
Dan Kane.
Dan Kane votes yes.
And Matt Wason votes yes. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 22nd of January. Do you think that, I'm guessing we don't have a ton on that agenda right now, Francis? Okay. Would that be sufficient time, do you think, or do you want a little more time before you come back to us?
I'd like to meet with my builder and discuss, but I expect that the 22nd of January will be a good time to come back and talk.
Perfect. And Francis, can you follow up with Jim and just see if we can get a little more detail? And if he is not going to be able to be at that meeting, please let me know so that I can have a conversation with him to talk just about track record for Littleton in 2 bedrooms.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you for coming along, Mr. Kidd.
Yep. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
Our next item on the agenda, 7:15, the infectious disease decision support tool. Let me pull that up. So COVID-19, we have the KP.311 variant has been around since the early fall. It's declining in popularity, and the new variant coming out is called XEC. It's kind of a cross between a couple of prior variants. The good news looking at it so far is that symptoms remain relatively the same. Seriousness of illness maintains relatively the same. And it looks like it would most likely respond well to our current vaccination that has been available this fall. For vaccination information, the town is at 28% as of right at the end of the year, which is, I guess, I don't know if I had to come up with the word appalling, I guess maybe would be nice. COVID is an illness that is going to be endemic now. It's going to happen all the time, every year, and it is serious, and it can make you severely ill. So I would really like to see how we can get these vaccination numbers up as we're kind of heading into the technical winter, and we are well below a third of our population being vaccinated in town. Case counts are on the right side. They're not huge in Littleton, so I'm sure that helps people feel like this isn't really a problem, but that doesn't mean that there aren't cases out there and potentially people getting admitted to the hospital for treatment. The wastewater numbers coming out of the Boston area have shot up since the last report, which was late November. So they are both over 1,000 now in the count. So that tends to be a signal that there is more of the virus going around, more of the virus coming out of people and spreading. And if there's one unfortunate thing about the XEC variant is that it does appear to be highly transmissible. So very easy to catch, even if it doesn't cause serious illness to everybody, it can spread rapidly. Moving on to influenza, state report still has influenza as low, which is nice. Vaccination for influenza for Littleton is at 46%, which is also a bit lower than I would like to see. Less than half of our population are appropriately vaccinated for that. And then lastly, RSV. These numbers are coming, the state of Massachusetts no longer reports RSV numbers. So this is coming from a news source from the CDC. And so we are at, as a state, basically they tell you how many tests, what percentage are positive that are given. So last time we reported back in November, I think the number was 3%, which would call it a low part of the season. Now that number is basically just under 26%. So that means 26% of those tests are positive, telling us that RSV is alive and well in the community and ramping up. So we have, while influenza still is low, RSV is kind of picking up the slack for the season right now, as well as what the numbers are showing, an increase in COVID cases. Questions, comments? Kevin Davis.
I know H5N1 seems to be getting some press recently and lately. I've read through some of the things. I know the CDC says the risk is low, but I'm concerned about it. I don't know if any other board members are concerned about it, but listening to some virologists and some other people, they're kind of at like DEFCON 3 right now. So I know there's nothing the board can do right at this moment, but I think we should kind of stay on top of it and keep our finger on the pulse, shall we say. I do know that my daughter going to UConn, they have prohibited now people from going to all the dairy barns and things like that to make sure that the spread, if it does happen to hit the cows, that it goes nowhere. So they are implementing that as well. So we might want to think about letting people know about our backyard flocks and our cows, if there are any in Littleton. I don't think we have any cows in Littleton currently, but not sure on that. Hence, which will lead into our next discussion topic, or somewhere down the way, making sure that we have a way of reporting that if all of a sudden their flocks or their livestock animals are having issues that we need to know, so that way it can be reported appropriately to the DPH, et cetera. That's all.
Thank you, Kevin. I was trying to mull over what we could potentially objectively report. So if you come up with something, let me know.
The only thing I could think objectively reporting would be a zoonotic infection or an infection in a different animal base in our town or a neighboring town, if we can even get that data, which I don't think we can. But that would be the only thing I would like say, hey, we have an issue, it's in town. Right?
Yeah. Because the CDC reports livestock, cattle livestock that have tested positive by the state level. And so the closest state is Michigan to us.
Right. Correct.
So there's nothing closer than that. And we could report, we can definitely report that. And then obviously, I think if there's something more serious, as it were, then yes.
Agreed.
I'll look at Francis. Oh, he's over here. We'll make sure we're reporting that kind of information as well to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, that's my big thing. I'm not, raising an alarm, but I'm just saying, hey, our level of concern should be elevated.
So do you want to do like an advisory message for the community, or?
I'm torn. I don't want to raise it too early to say, hey, there's something, but I think maybe people that have backyard flocks or livestock or, whatever kind of stock, I think they may need to get a little notice saying, hey, please be aware if you have a sick bird or something like that, or a sick livestock thing, you need to report that to us.
I agree with your initial response, which physically manifested itself as a no. But I agree. I think just putting some information out, I don't think it has to be a townwide communique or something like that, but let's get some resources available on our website. At nothing else, let's have what is it and what does it mean and what should I look for? And then to Kevin's point, perhaps those people with livestock that have some increased risk get some communication.
There is a DPH or Massachusetts something I saw somewhere. I'm trying to remember the wording of it right now, but it escapes me. But basically, if you have livestock or something testing positive for that it needs to be reported in the infectious disease something or another. There's a phone number to call or something. So maybe, Francis, I'll see if I can find that and just send that to you in an email. So that way you can put that resource on the webpage.
Okay.
Anything else for Kevin or Dan? Okay. That brings us to our 720 agenda item, discussion on the air quality sensor grant. Assume that's you, Francis.
So we sent it out after, but if you got the map and you have it available, anything with a gold star areas in the town that have all the capabilities that we would need to be able to place the sensors. There's also 2 locations with green flags that with the red squares around them are potential locations that we're still checking on to see if we can make those areas work. So this kind of gives you a spread around town of where we could possibly put these, and we know we can. So we're just kind of looking for feedback from the board on the areas in town.
So you said the areas in town with the yellow is areas that'll work, and the areas with a flag is a
potential location. We're still waiting on confirmation.
Okay.
We did want to do monitoring stations, but we were told we are not allowed to because of the network that they are on. It's not allowed to connect any other devices to it.
What do you mean monitoring stations? Define.
Anything that Light and Water would have in town for any wells or water resource stations anywhere in town that has something that's updated in real time. And they have a network that has to be secure in some separate way.
Littleton LELWD or the one for the state?
For the local.
LELWD has to have it per DHS regulations, yes. But I also contend this other network is going to have the same cyber requirements. And from that other granting, not us, but us participating in it, their network's going to have the same cyber requirements because of, yeah. So, so what you're saying is we'd have to duplicate the sensors at the already existing LELWD sites?
Yeah, I mean, we could potentially connect to their power, but we'd still need Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi or just network connectivity?
You know, I guess technically network connectivity.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. We should probably chat.
Okay.
While I understand I understand the DHS requirements on power grid control and water controls and things like that. I get that, got that. Like, that's my other day job. I also understand the networking side of this, and there are ways that you can tunnel the data on the existing networks without impacting their ability or the state's ability to do that. So we can figure that out, I think. I understand sensors and the different things about real-time sensors reporting in, and the other one's probably a polling sensor. So the data's not in real time, and I get that. So I'm just more worried. I'm just concerned about sharing a pipe, and there are ways to do that without impacting the service guarantees.
Okay. Well, we can talk offline.
Yep.
Thank you, Kevin. You can follow up on the technical side of things. I think the other important question is, devil's advocate, why not just put them at the yellow stars and call it good? I know there's concern from members of the board about, are we covering a representative area? So do we need to take it offline and provide some feedback, or what are we missing, or where do we want one of these yellow dots that we don't have right now? Kevin.
Is there a map we could look at with like prevailing winds and topography? Maybe that we could layer on top of this, Francis? I don't know if that's possible.
I have no idea. I can look into it.
You need the
That'll
GIS.
give us.
I think that's the point we're going to get to, is that to be tied to kind of existing physical structures, some of which are very close to each other, does not necessarily provide a representative measure for our community. And I agree, being a little more scientific about the placement would be terrific if we can get over the technical requirements, which Kevin Davis has assured us that he can. Right. Dan King.
Yeah, thank you. So it sounds like our current dots on our map are a convenience sample, basically. It is someplace where we think we have infrastructure to put them, not necessarily based on any air quality scientific method. It basically is a place with power and Wi-Fi. And you mentioned confirmation, so it sounds like, again, just simply You talked to people and they said, yeah, you can put one here. We have power and Wi-Fi you can use.
No, waiting to hear back. So we have a call in with Mass Wildlife that we need confirmation that they'd be able to do it, but it looks like their site can.
Hold on. I'm going to ask us to back the truck up a little bit. That we start with. So here's where we are. It sounds like you've done some work in the background, but you're sharing it piecemeal. So tell us a story. We've gotten this grant. We have 10 units. Here's our requirements from the state of what we want to look at. Here's what our infrastructure resource requirements are to implement it, power and Wi-Fi or internet access, and work from there. So I think we know some of those pieces, but so I'm just trying to figure out what you're saying versus the work that it represents. So you said waiting on confirmation. Was that just for our 2 red boxes with flags, or was that for all of the sites presented on the map, or something else?
Those are just for the 2 red boxes.
Okay. So all of our yellow ones, you have contacted those places and they've said, sure, we're happy to put them here if you'd like. Okay.
Yes.
So I think a slightly more, it's again, we're looking for our car keys under the street light because that's where the light is. I think we want to be a little bit more scientific and thoughtful about how we can, even if it means 1 or 2 sites, we have to invest a few dollars for a, pick your cell service of record hotspot kind of thing. And we stick them all in a box on a pole someplace. As long as we get power, we can make internet for a relatively small investment, if that's what makes the most sense for the biggest impact for our goal. And it sounds like our goal of this is assessing the air quality in our town. So that really is a scientific process. That's not we've got a building with power. Obviously, we want to find that balance between the two. I would say these dots in the map, have you looked at the Purple Air program online, what they have for resources and how their mapping works and that kind of stuff?
So what kind of degree do you mean?
Well, I'm going to point out that we will currently have one of your dots is at Littleton Town Hall.
Yep.
Currently, there's a sensor at the library on the same network.
Yeah, that's just our testing one right now. The IT is trying to figure out how they work. Yeah.
Okay, because it's reporting, so it's there and reporting. So would that be a move? Would that going to leave it at the library, or is that?
That's just IT doing that to see how they work and trying to test them out in the field to see what they need to do on their end. I don't think it would stay there. Probably just be easier to keep it town hall. But the other thing to consider is we don't have a budget for other items to add on or monthly recurring fees. So I don't know how we do that or where we'd get the money. I mean, I can ask town administration.
What is our state timeline? I know we talked about, it sounds like they wanted a plan basically now. Is that still the state's request for implementation?
Correct, yep.
Okay. I'm going to hold my tongue for a moment. We can pass on to the rest of the board and we can come back if that's okay.
I don't have a whole lot more input other than, like I said, it would be nice to be a little more scientific and not constrained just by where we have the facilities. I'm just trying to look at a slightly more zoomed out map of town to see if we're kind of covering everywhere, which geographically it looks like we're kind of close. That, the transfer station kind of gets up to that end of town. There's a bit of community that's kind of northeast of that's off the map. And then southeast, the distance from basically the Shaker Lane and Long Lake Beach, all that area down there is kind of uncovered currently. Not as many houses and neighborhoods down there, but it's still a big geographic area that would be nice to get a picture of. And then, as Kevin mentioned, if we put them all in really high places or really low places, I don't think that's as good of an option because I think you're going to want a better distribution. So that you're seeing samples of both types, because some things are going to be worse in low areas and some things might be worse in high areas, I assume. So I appreciate, I know France has been trying to get this rocking, and we as a board have kind of, I think, keep wanting more out of it. So what can we realistically do as a next step? And I think we need to give ourselves a deadline that if we don't come up with a more perfect solution, which might not be possible by a certain time, we just need to get going on this, I think. So do we need to set a deadline of we're going to try to figure something out better by X, and if not, we're going to get it rocking since I assume DPH wants us to?
We can also move these over time as well.
How long of a window do we have to use them for testing?
I'd say within 30 days, they're going to say yes or no.
Give them back?
Yeah.
Okay. Moving could be nice, but I mean, scientifically, I would assume you'd want, I'm no expert on air measurement, but I assume you want to be moving around too often because conditions are going to change. So I assume you wouldn't want to move a sensor more than once total so that you're capturing enough window of data depending on weather and everything else.
And you said with the initial grant, we get 10. Does that mean we can get 10 more with another grant, or is it 10 our limitation?
10 is the limit.
Okay. But you did say you can move them. Okay.
Yep.
Because down in the corner, there's this really big tower that sits on top of a hill.
Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, sir. I mean, I think under the circumstances, we're boxed in. We need to have these basically in place in 30 days or they go back. And I think that would be a horrible loss of a resource. I think if these are locations that are picked that we can have property owners agree to and can provide power and internet access for them, I mean, I don't think we have a choice. I think we just need to get them in. And again, I would love to have a little bit more of a scientific approach to coverage and winds and, high potential areas, those kind of things. But I think the data scientist in me hates this, but something is better than nothing and done is better than perfect. I'd rather have 10 sensors, 3 or 4 of them in great locations and some are in okay locations and some are questionable, than have no sensors anywhere because we simply couldn't take that first step and make it happen. I would say we try to move forward so that we get to take advantage of this grant that's been obtained and get them out there. If we need to change something, we change something, but I think we need to show that I don't want us to lose this opportunity. But that's just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Dan. Go ahead, Kevin.
I really like that 2 cents. I'll add a penny to it to make it 3. And why don't we just say, almost like, why don't we just say right now, these are the going in solutions. Let's just go with it. And then let's take an action in February or March to get some scientific data together and then look at repositioning them. So that way we can get all that data together. Does that make sense? Kind of like that 2-phased approach. First phase, get the 10, get the initial position, get them up and running. So that way we get through the grant process. And then the second phase is we look at the scientific data, give us a little more time, and then position them appropriately.
I think it's a possibility. I think there are no guarantees for anything future. So, but let's just Right? Only three things can happen. One, they all make our air look terrible, in which case, doesn't matter where we put them. Two, it all makes our air look perfect, and all of us sit here wondering if we put them in the right spots or not. Or B, or C, it's all mixed, and we figure out that, gosh, we probably have to do some further looking. So it'll be a good start, and only if they're all terrible do we actually have a clear path forward, which is the worst path. Of note, the high school is not one of the dots. Is that ruled out as a possibility? I only ask because of the topography there. It kind of goes up and adds a little elevation, which could be interesting because I think it ends up being a higher altitude than Littleton Electric.
It is.
I can ask. Facilities said they're having difficulties trying to place it up there, but
Okay.
new type of outlet.
And then can it be at any private or commercial location with permission, or?
Yes, it could, if you can get said permission.
Okay.
Typically, people kind of get fearful when they say, "Hi, I'm the government. I'd like to connect to your network and plug into your electric."
Yeah. But we could do it at like Kevin Davis's house and not tell him, for example.
I'd actually, so what's really funny is I have my setup at my house. I have solar, so you can plug into the solar for free, and if it works, great. And I have a network connection with a firewall that puts you out into the DMZ, so I could care less.
Kevin Baker, did you have something else?
I was actually going to ask Mr. Davis if he could come up with a budget plan for us to put one wherever we want. You know, standalone power and internet access.
Yeah,
See
we
what it
can.
would take to do that, because I think we're going to find that we need maybe to put somewhere where we don't have that stuff.
Yeah, so that actually is definitely doable. I can work with Francis to get the specs on the sensors, and then once we know the spec on the sensor for power and wattage and all that kind of good stuff, that's super easy to put together.
Awesome.
And the only other one that I was thinking about is I don't suppose there's any services up at the Nagog Hill Orchard.
I checked. No.
Okay, because that's another like a kind of higher elevation that would be kind of like, but
So, and there's
no readily available Wi-Fi up there.
and there's nothing at the AT&T tower.
Like again, you'd have to get permission from AT&T to connect to it, though, right?
I understand, but there might already be a widget that's there that's from the town. Like I could have sworn we had at one point, maybe I'm totally wrong on this. Didn't we have an antenna for the town up there for a while ago for a transmitter?
You're way above my head right now. I don't know. We can connect with IT as well and find out what goes on in town in terms of technical.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so what's the time limit on this? How soon do you think we actually have to get them out? I thought that we had 30 days of data collection time, or is it we have 30 days till we have to mail them back effectively?
Well, I think we have 30 days until they're going to say it's been enough time now that you need to pack it up or put it up now.
Okay, then I would say, unless somebody wants to really argue otherwise, we get as many out there as quickly as possible then.
Phase 1, phase 2.
Okay.
We'll have Dan Kane's data scientist start to twitch a little, but at least phase 2 will do better.
Some data is better than no data most of the time. Most of the time.
Well, right now we're flying blind. We have nothing.
We have
All
one. We have the library. We have
Yeah.
one. That's a data point. It's one.
And then of one.
Anything further? Closing this discussion for now then. Next agenda item is our 7:25 p.m. discussion on the draft stable regulations. Francis, kick us off.
So for the stable regulations, we don't have anything in place currently. So in terms of trying to enforce it, it seemed like a good idea to have something on the books that we can point to. In compiling this together, the strongest stable regulations in Massachusetts were Stowe, Westboro, and Yarmouth. So looking at the three, a culmination, put this together. We also are concurrently going out and doing stable inspections. I'm introducing myself to the stable owners, talking about the regulation and asking them to be a part of the process in terms of commenting, making notes on things to look at and what not to look at and what might not be common to us, just to get a better idea of how these could work, because it's a small group and they're very passionate.
Do we consider backyard flocks to be part of this?
We can go into more general animal regulation if you want, but that could be quite a rabbit hole. And then we're getting into chickens too. And I've been down that route before. I don't know if you want to go down there, but we can.
I mean, I'll echo it. In my mind, when we started this, I was thinking, yeah, how are we gonna define this to apply to all of the animals that it should? Like, I was thinking chickens and goats and horses and cows, even though we don't have any cows in town right now, as far as we're aware. But those other towns you used as an example, they just have horse stable.
Yeah. Usually towns close to the city have an animal reg. Usually the further out you go, you only find some stable reg, if anything, but typically not animal in general.
Harvard seems to have animal in general.
So they permit chickens, pigs, goats, everything.
If I remember reading it correctly, I can go take a quick look. Well, I'll go take a quick gander and see what Harvard has.
Meanwhile, Kevin Baker, your thoughts on horses and animals?
I thought the draft regulation looked great.
Cool. Dan Kane.
Sorry, I have a couple questions. One, I think the basic outline looks really good. I did have a question around definitions under I take back. We had exceptions. Hold on, trying to find it again. I didn't highlight it. For license to stable, first paragraph, except in the case of agriculture or farming exemptions, as listed in Mass 128.
Yeah, I attached it as the last page. Yeah.
Yep. So I guess my question is, how are farming or agricultural stables regulated, inspected, whatever? Looking at the definition in 128 1A, it's farming and agriculture is tilling of land and all that good stuff. Growing of, I'm trying to get the right part. The keeping of horses as a commercial enterprise. So I guess, how does that, what is the practical definition of the keeping of horses as a commercial exercise, which sounds like it would be the most applicable agriculture farming exception for our purposes? Does that mean I've got a riding club, so I own horses and people come and ride my horses or learn to ride? Does that mean I run a stable where I rent out stable space to others for their horses? Does that count as a commercial enterprise? So I think my question is, how does that agriculture and farming exemption apply to kind of the real world examples in town? If I've got 3 horses that are private on my property, but I've got 20 acres and I've got a 30 stable barn, and I rent out my other 28 spots, is now that stable exempt because it's a commercial endeavor? Is if I have others come in and run? So I guess that might be, how does that exemption apply real world? Is this designed to only apply to, hi, I've got a horse and I like a stable, or is this for all horses in town? I think we just want to clarify what that exemption means and looks like, and how it, and spell it out, because commercial enterprise, if I rent out a stable now, I don't have to be inspected because it's a commercial enterprise. And whatever those exemptions are, how do we then maintain health, safety, security, all those other pieces that we need to be concerned about for a stable? I know we talked about, we don't think we have cows in town. I don't think we do either. My piece of, obviously, I don't want to get all the way down to, chickens and hamsters and stuff at this point, but certainly as possible. I grew up in Woburn, and I had a friend who had 2 donkeys. So Woburn, even back then, not exactly the rural town of Littleton, but I had a friend who had donkeys in their yard. Would donkeys fall under this? Donkeys aren't horses. Does that count? How does that apply? Do we need to? It's possible. How do we just kind of cover that? Because I think that could be, I don't know, where do we draw the line? I'm not sure how far to go. I don't quite know how the definition of that would work. Horses only? Someone would say, nope, it's a donkey, it's an ass, it's this, it's that, it doesn't apply. It's a cow, it doesn't apply.
Donkeys are included in the definition of horse.
Is it? Okay, thank you.
It's all of them.
Okay.
Anything you can think of, it's in
All
the
right.
definition, yes.
Cool beans. Thank you, sir, for double checking on that one. But yeah, so I think that agricultural exception is probably my biggest kind of question, just so we're clear of how we're going to apply it. I think the rest of the pieces looked really good. I think the intent and the structure was good. I just had that question about the exemption.
Can Francis address part of that before you ask him something else? So, Francis, the key question there is, then what about the exemption for farming agricultural farmer?
I guess it's more about use, and that doesn't really capture many places in town. So we do capture commercial and private stables, but they're for recreational use. They're not for farming. Does that make sense?
I guess that's the key part about horses in the 128(1)A is keeping of horses as a commercial enterprise. That's the phrase. So if you serve riding lessons, are you keeping horses as a commercial enterprise? And therefore you're exempt from this regulation. And Dan's follow-up question was, if you're exempt, then are you following some other regulation? Does some other body have oversight? So we're fine? Or woof, you're exempt and now we don't know what's going on. Because an exemption is okay if that means they're held to some higher standard managed by some better funded organization.
I want to say MDAR steps in at that stage, but I get the point. I was thinking more narrowly, but it kind of contradicts, I guess. Yes.
It's just like Dan said, it's the same as if I'm boarding horses, have I become commercial? And I have no idea. I assume there would be other requirements at the state level if you were operating a commercial. I don't know if they have to have additional licenses to board, whatever it might be, but they might have employees taking care of those boarded horses. And so it's looking more and more commercial as you go down that road. But I want to echo Kevin Baker. I think this is a terrific start. The yellow highlighted passages, were those anything specific that you wanted us to discuss, or?
Those were anything highlighted kind of varied town to town. It seemed like it was personal preference.
Okay.
But I'm also thinking maybe I can reach out to Brad on the agricultural committee.
Okay.
And hear what his thoughts are as well. We did send it to conservation too, to hear what they have to say.
Cool. And then Kevin Davis, you raised your hand a little bit ago.
I do. And my follow-up to this is, if we look at it from again, let me reiterate, awesome work. So this is all a great start. So let's go from there and make it more awesome. So the more awesome side to this, if I remember correctly, the stabling stuff is all about manure control and the runoff of potential pathogens and other things within the manure. So the reason why I'm saying having a control even of backyard flocks is that if you have this up, if it's upwind is the wrong word, but up elevation from somebody's well or your own well in your property or something like that, or it's going into someone's vegetables or into some sort of water source for other animals or something like that. I think that's one of the concerns I have, right? That's the reason why I'm sitting here saying, backyard flock of more than 10 birds, we should start to consider because the amount of manure produced by 10 chickens, blah, blah, blah. Whatever level we need to set, I think that's where my concern comes from. Like 4 or 5 chickens, yeah, okay, it shouldn't be a big deal. But where's that level come where we have to start to worry about the runoff from the manure pile? Or what do you do with your manure pile? Do you throw it away? Do you, that type of thing? The other thing is I emailed you Harvard's form.
Yep. We have something very similar right now.
Okay. Just, it has all of the animals. That's it.
Okay.
And in that permit, by the way, this goes to Dan's question. There's private training, board-in lessons, other fill-in. So stable use, number of animals on the property, layout plan, manure management. Ta-da.
So you mean we would get stables, but we'd also want to know what other animals they have, not necessarily just animals in general.
So this gets back to our discussion that we had earlier with H5N1, right? Pathogen is going to exist. It's going to come in through wild birds, infect other animals.
No, I understand. But if we want to go down this road, it's going to be really tricky to capture these in town, keep up on them over the year and future years. And I think there's going to be a lot of issues on the way. I mean, we don't have staffing that could really be able to go that much in depth if there's that many. I mean, how many animal permits do you think we'd likely give out in town? I think it'd be pretty significant.
I think it's worth, what I would say is, this is great work so far. Let's start and get the stable wrapped up. Then horses and all their related can be
Equine.
tied up in a bow. Solid hoofed animals, Kevin.
Sorry, thank you.
And that gets us a start. I think as a board, eyes are open, and I think there's potential concern about, pet dogs have to be permitted in town, and stables now have to be permitted in town. And what about everything else? What's going on? And while I hear you that staffing, we don't have the staffing necessarily to be managing a lot of this, I don't think that's a reason to not say we should have at least some sort of registration process potentially. And maybe that's all it would be to start. Maybe it's just asking anybody with any other types of animals to be registering them, even if it's a $5 fee or something like that. That's not necessarily including a manure removal plan or a wastewater runoff analysis, but it's just having a better understanding for the animals, besides hamsters and small things that live in bedrooms, that exist in town. So let's keep exploring that. But I think this is pretty close if you want to just kind of do a little more mulling over of how to kind of address the commercial side of thing that we discussed today. And I think that's pretty close.
Yeah, I think Brad would be a great resource, so I'm kind of curious now what he would say.
And then Kevin kind of mentioned it as he was going along. does the permit include, okay, yeah, so there's a line in here that says applicants will disclose the proposed number of horses to be kept. I feel like for a stable that might have some dynamic numbering, they might want to be able to say we will house up to X number of horses, and your permit could say that. And therefore, if there is some change and somebody opens or expands and suddenly has more animals, that they would have to come back for a reapplication or an adjustment or something. If you could just kind of figure out if there's what happens if there's a change to the criteria for my permit within the 1 year cycle, I guess is what I'm getting at. Anything further on stable permits? Should we move to unstable permits? That's good. That's good. Great. It's getting late. Thank you for that. Administrative matters. First, there's one set of meeting minutes at the end of our packet today. Minutes for the meeting of December 11th, 2024. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes? Very well. I was not present at that meeting, so I cannot speak to them.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes of December 11th, 2024 as presented.
I believe that was a second by Kevin Davis.
Second, sorry, you didn't. Maybe I didn't get my mute off in time, but yeah, it's the second.
Yeah, didn't hear it quite up. Okay, motion and a second to approve. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis, yes.
Dan Kane,
Dan Kane votes yes.
Matt Wason abstains. The other piece from those minutes that was mentioned that would be punted to this meeting was I swear I saw it here earlier, the meeting schedule. So what I proposed to Francis, at least for the foreseeable future, until I'm kicked out of the chair, would be to continue to meet on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month. Is that okay with everybody? Would anybody like it to be different? Terrific. The only other one I wanted to bring up just to make sure was we had 2 tobacco violations that came in early December. Were those discussed at the 11th meeting?
No.
Okay. Not that they needed to because they did not ask for a public hearing, but I believe those need to be paid by 30 days, I assume. Do we know if those were paid?
Yes.
They were? Terrific. Okay, then Francis, any other administrative matters that you need to raise?
I'd just like to say that Megan is doing a really great job. It has made a significant difference in the office. We're getting a lot more done, and it's relieving a lot of the pressure of before. So
Perfect.
I just want the board to know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
We are putting together a application. The CDC has a fellowship program of recent graduates, and they try to place them. And so we're applying an application. It would be a 2-year grant of a graduate. They pay for everything. We might have to pay for some incidentals, but nothing significant. It's a good opportunity for free labor. So we're working on that. And also, budget presentations are at the end of the month. No, they're at the beginning of the month, February 1st. Now, no one is under any obligation to come, but if someone wanted to come, you're more than welcome. So I kind of wanted to put that to the board, mull it over, We have another meeting before that presentation, so.
Is there anything you need from the board between now and then to help build a case, explain anything, go to bat, anything at all?
There is. So we were informed that we can only do a 1/3 nurse instead of half-time.
Okay.
Not the end of the world. Acton is fully on board with that as well. They will absorb the additional hours if need be, and I think it's still okay at the end of the day. 13 hours is significantly more than what we have now, so
Yep.
that'll be a big change in itself. The other thing is they said no to a halftime inspector. They said the agreement was that one person only, and so they will not approve it no matter what. I think I can do it, but it's going to be tricky. It's just one person.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Who's they?
The town administrator's office.
Is it Brian or Jim or Ryan and Jim or?
I would say it's collectively both.
Okay. Thank you.
And what agreement?
They said that as part of leaving Neshoba, that the condition was that one person would only staff the office.
For the next year, for the next 6 months, for the next
I'd
forever?
like to see that in writing because I don't think that's actually a thing.
No, obviously that's not anything this board ever agreed to.
Yeah, that's
Thank
And
you
Jim
for
wasn't
talking.
present when this plan was created. Perhaps it behooves us to, before then budget time becomes final, have a meeting with town administrators. Just to kind of review our plan and how things have gone for the last 6 months or so, and what we still forecast the future to look like. That should be me and Francis and Jim and or Ryan. And another volunteer if anybody's willing. Kevin Davis.
tell me when.
Um,
Are there better times or days? Or we can talk about it later, I guess.
Take it offline. Just
Yeah.
come up with a bunch of
I'm
different
pretty
days.
flexible.
See which one overlaps correctly.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope. We're applying for another internship with DPH to have a rolling student that they would pay for as well.
Fun.
Small program.
Good. Member updates. Kevin Baker, what do you got?
I have no member updates tonight.
Kevin Davis.
I've included all of my member updates during the normal course of the meeting.
So you hijacked the meeting. Okay, good. Good. All right, Dan Kane.
All right, hold on, let me get my list. I saw an update that we were approved for Narcan program. Hooray! Awesome job. And we were talking about a training that happened, right?
Yes. November.
Okay. Are we going to do any
Yeah.
more trainings?
We definitely can. We only had about 3 people show up, which was disappointing. It was a good presentation, though. We can definitely try for more. I think it'd be worthwhile meeting with the school committee at some point in the near future about a couple things, because I think there's a lot of engagement possibilities there that are constrained right now. So I also would ask if maybe a board member would consider coming to a meeting with me as well.
Okay. Yep. Awesome. All right. Nope. Thank you. we kind of talked about air quality, but I was wondering, is there any follow-up from your visit to the quarry with DEP?
So two updates on two things. Yes. So first, dust complaint. She's talked to the owner and then told me that we're not going to go to the spring now because they're not
So you-
operational.
Sorry. Could you explain that you're not going to visit them until the spring?
So we had planned to go out together, DEP and Littleton, to observe the site and observe the conditions. Between after the meeting and when we were supposed to meet, DEP called and said that they're not operational, so they do not want to go out until they are operational again.
Okay. Was there another update along with that, or was that the update from about the quarry for you?
Separate complaint.
Okay. I would, as I was heading out to do carpool this afternoon, I'm not sure if everybody's noticed, it's been awfully windy the last couple days. I have a lovely video. One, I've been looking out my back window and watching the clouds move through my trees. I have a lovely video of just watching the cloud of stone dust blowing out of the quarry and across Air Road and that whole area, because usually it's a westerly wind. Now it's an easterly wind. But so the fact that they're not blasting or operational doesn't really change the fact that we have a big open pit of stone dust. And every time the wind blows, it creates a cloud of stone dust, particularly with these dry, windy conditions. I admit I had hoped we'd have a quarter-inch of snow most of the winter, which truthfully has done their job. OSHA would be happy with a half-inch of snow because it's now dust control. We don't have that, so I'm disappointed the DEP went, we're not going to worry about it, when if you've driven down Air Road in any of these windy days and glanced that way, you'd go, that's potentially concerning. I know our town council doesn't necessarily think the Board of Health has much authority over many things, but air quality is completely within our scope, DEP scope as well, but that does not necessarily override our scope for air quality concerns. So I guess I'm not sure what, if anything, our next step should be, but I continue to be pretty concerned when I'm watching clouds of silica or potentially silica dust blowing all over this side of town. And we haven't even looked at it yet. I'm a little bit concerned, which is why I brought it up in the first place. So I mean, it is what it is, beyond my scope, but I'm re-emphasizing my concern of kicking the can down the road again is disappointing.
Right. Would we want to make maybe some kind of board resolution letter for DEP to come to a meeting to discuss it as a chronic condition that is impacting the environmental health of the town in some way? And that prolonging it has happened for too long and there's more immediate concern.
Well, Mr. Baker had his hand up. If I just one moment, I'd say we need data, which is why I said we need to do some air quality assessment months ago. That we can't issue any order, we can't do it without data. And I'm happy to show you my video, but that's pretty or not, but it's not data. We need to show that if there is a concern, what is the concern, what we found, and is it happening outside of their property line? Now there's something that is potentially actionable if required and at the will of the board. But we need air quality measurements, which is why we requested it months ago.
Before we get to the Kevins, Dan, would you please, as a citizen, forward that video to the health director so that they can observe your complaint and potentially also send that to DP to say, operational or not, there's still a problem. Kevin Baker.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I was driving down Air Road the other day, and if you look at the fencing there's a section of it you can actually see right through, and you can see the piles that are uncovered, that are from where the dust that Dan is describing is coming from. So if you don't have to actually go on the property to see it. You just look right through the green silt fence, and you can see the piles that are causing the problem. Then I think there's a regulation that says they have to be covered. So maybe you just take some pictures of that.
I can go down tomorrow.
Dan's got and make the case, because it's quite evident that's the problem.
Kevin Davis.
And if it's non-operational, while they may not be blasting, I seem to recall something in December that shook my house, because we're deed restricted to know that there's an active quarry right behind us. So I'm pretty sure there was a blast in the December timeframe. And I'm also pretty sure I've seen trucks go in and out of that entire facility. And so, yes, it's not construction season, but I don't think they're not shipping stone out of that facility.
Francis, please first try to get back to DP and say, listen, whatever your definition of operational is, the place is operating. It's continuing to cause observable, obvious problems. And if they seem reluctant to come out and take a look, then please let us know immediately, and we can, as a board, put something more firm together.
Okay. Dan, would you be able to send me something just so I can have support for that? And
Yep.
I'll go out tomorrow, where Kevin mentioned, and take some pictures and video.
Absolutely.
Kevin Davis, did you have something else?
Yeah, totally separate. But so when we finish this, just come back to me.
Then ball's back to you, Dan. This was your update time.
All right. Only the two things are: one, the Project New Hope is running a human trafficking information how to spot it in your community. It's in Southbridge, which is obviously quite a ride for us, but for anybody who might be interested, we are at intersections of two major highways. We have a hotel. We are not ground zero, but we certainly have the potential for those who interact with the public on a regular basis, a potential to identify folks who may be trafficked. January 23rd, 6:30 at the library in Southbridge. Anybody has any questions, I'm happy to share the information about it. The other thing is just informational. I thought it was actually pretty interesting. The Chelmsford Board of Health is actually really, really active with community outreach, and they've worked with their DPW, one of their local hardware stores, and their medical response corps, civilian emergency response teams, to put together a free safe footing kit for elderly. Basically, it's a bucket of salt for your walkways, a shovel, a brush, some gloves, a couple other things, and some hints of how to prevent slips and falls, particularly for the elderly. So it's free to anyone over 55. It was a really interesting looking idea. It takes a little bit of labor, but not necessarily a lot of mental work. That obviously it's pretty late in the year to try to put this together, but certainly an idea for, as we're looking at interns and those kind of things, potentially for next year, or other similar ideas, whether it's, hydration for summer, or, cooling packs for folks with our air conditioning and our elderly housing, those kind of pieces. Great opportunities for some outreach. I know our budget doesn't exist, but one of those places we may be able to find opportunities to get either big grant funding or small grant funding or donations to put together some of that outreach, which would, address potential needs in our community, and also hopefully build some goodwill and connections between us, Elder and Human Services, DPW, and our residents. So I thought it was really interesting. They do a lot of great work, but they have some interesting ideas of how to provide some outreach and injury prevention, some of the things that we don't always necessarily think about. So I think that's the end of my list. I'm sorry. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dan. You're second to last, are you going to be able to attend the seminar in wherever on January 23rd?
I'm going to try. I'm not sure of my calendar. I have to double check my calendar. I'm going to try. I can't guarantee.
Will you send that to myself or Francis?
I will share it out to Francis and the board. Please don't discuss. I'll just send out the info via our email.
Back to you, Kevin Davis.
Sorry, there was a comment this morning that I heard in the state news about a bunch of people, I don't know who the people were, that were getting back to the governor about the closure of the Neshoba Air Hospital. And a bunch of towns were telling about how the resources are going up and all that kind of good stuff. Are we included in that, or did Littleton miss out on that?
I believe the fire chief is directly handling that.
Okay. Then does the fire chief need any support from us?
I can ask him, but I don't believe at this point. But
Because we did
Checking.
write that letter and I don't think it went anywhere. So if we need to adjust that letter and move forward, we can do that. I can't volunteer the board. It would be interesting if the board would entertain that. That's
Very
it.
well. Anything else?
the point.
Talk to us.
So we were able to track down the sewage plant. The project engineer who originally built the point, we're meeting with him in the current management company for the plant next week. And we're going to discuss what happened and why and what are we going to do so it won't happen again. They said upgrades were made. I said I need more information about that. There seems to be a very large gap here. So
Holding tanks with the supposed upgrades.
yeah. But even if those were done, clearly more needs to be done in terms of much more regular maintenance. So we might be at another meeting proposing to do some forced increased monitoring and cleaning and maintenance of grease traps. We'll see how the meeting goes next week.
Okay, the point's kind of bizarre because we've got like this, the treatment plant is under the authority of DEP, but theoretically grease traps and those things would be under us, but it's how they interact and how do we combine the two bodies to work together.
Yeah, I mean, I just need a better education and a better understanding, and that's kind of why they're both willing to come. So it'll be good to get a clearer picture.
I thought also, depending upon phasing of buildings, that the DEP license was supposed to have phase 2 completed for the plant. And I don't think we've ever gotten phase 2 completed with the amount of buildings that are there.
I haven't seen anything about phase 2, but once I have a better idea, I'll be able to report back to the board.
I do think that's part of why some of the buildings are unoccupied at the moment because they didn't have capacity in the system to be able to. But I think that was after our last round of questions about the point was that was their temporary solution was simply not filling some of the storefronts, but that was some time ago. So because they didn't have capacity.
One other thing in the point I just remembered is Starbucks is requesting to bring back their carafes that they had out for creamers and such. Pre-COVID, they did have those out for customers, and then during COVID, they were brought back in and they served themselves instead of letting customers be able to use them. And they want to put them back out. In the old food code, used to require a variance for it, and when they switched over to 2013, it's no longer required to have a variance. So it'd be time as a public health control. I don't have any issues with it. I've always worked in town with a Starbucks, and they've never had any issues. And they seem to be pretty good about keeping up on it. But if the board has any concerns, just shoot me an email. That's all I got.
All right. I don't have any news. We've kicked a few things down the road a couple of times. So at our next meeting, if our agenda is not too heavy, I would like to have time dedicated to discuss room counts and basements. kind of gone back and forth in my head about how we best deal with it. I know Kevin Baker has some suggestion ideas, and you sent out the old rules. So I think we should decide whether we kind of want to resurrect old rules, whether we want to make guidelines, regulations, how things we want to define. So please think to yourself, do some brainstorming. What do you think are some ideas? And ideally, we can use the meeting time to potentially throw out ideas for how it could be done. Not necessarily come to a decision of this is the way to do it, but perhaps it's a grab bag of enough ideas that it gives Francis some reasonable ground to then say, okay, well, let me draft something that will likely meet all of our demands and requirements and such. Okay, so let's make a little progress on this one. Next meeting, everybody can be there? Good. I hope I can. And that's about all I wanted to raise. Other than that, it's a wrap.
I move to adjourn.
Great.
Second.
Yeah, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Well, that was the hardest one of the night. Roll call vote, Kevin Baker,
Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis,
Herman Davis votes yes.
Dan Kane,
And Kane votes yes.
Matt Wason votes yes. Thank you all for a good meeting, good conversation, good discussion. See you next time.